All right, so you know how we're all about finding those strategies kind of up our game in all aspects of life? Well,
Yeah.
today we're going deep on a book that might just flip the script on how we approach peak performance.
Yeah. This one's pretty different. It's not just another like rah, think positive kind of deal.
Right, exactly. It's called Getting to Neutral
Oh.
by Trevor Moawad.
Ah,
And this guy,
he's legit.
he's worked with some serious heavy hitters.
Mm.
Like in the world of pro sports, think Russell Wilson,
hmm
but also top business minds.
And his whole thing is that the real key, whether you're talking sports or the boardroom or just life, is this idea of neutral thinking.
Okay, so break it down for me. What exactly is neutral thinking, and how's it different from, that classic think positive advice?
So it's like finding that balance point
Right.
between going overboard with the optimism and then the other end of the spectrum, crushing negativity.
Yeah.
But it's not about becoming some emotionless robot. It's more about taking a step back,
Yeah.
seeing things clearly.
So like instead of totally freaking out about a deadline or getting like irrationally hyped over a small win,
Totally.
it's more about keeping your cool, having a steady approach.
It is. It's almost like emotional regulation in a way.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
And the book actually goes into the science behind why this works too,
Yeah.
which I think is really cool.
It gets into some really cool neuroscience. Basically, it helps you tap into the power of your prefrontal cortex,
Oh yeah, the prefrontal cortex
which is like the thinking, planning, decision-making part of your brain.
keeps those impulses in check
Yes.
while also keeping the amygdala, which I like to think of as like the drama queen of the brain,
Oh, totally.
because it handles all our emotional responses
Yeah.
from going completely haywire and hijacking our thoughts.
That's a great way to put it.
And you can see how that'd be especially useful in those high-pressure moments.
Exactly. And what's really cool is that Moawad doesn't just tell you to think neutrally.
Yeah.
He actually gives you a whole set of strategies to actually do it,
Yeah.
to make it a habit.
So it's not just a concept.
It's not just an idea, it's a practice.
Okay, I'm intrigued. What kind of strategies are we talking about?
Well, first it starts with self-awareness.
Makes sense.
Right. Got to know what's going on in your head
Yeah.
before you can change it. So do you tend to go negative really easily?
Oh, yeah?
Or maybe you're the opposite where you're like, this is going to be amazing, and then maybe you get let down later.
I think we've all been there at some point, either the doom and gloom or those rose-colored glasses.
Yeah.
So how do we actually get better at seeing those patterns as they're happening in our own minds?
Well, Mowad's a big fan of journaling.
Oh, interesting.
Doesn't have to be anything fancy.
Yeah.
Just a place to jot down your thoughts.
It's like a thought tracker
It is.
to help you notice when you're like catastrophizing or setting unrealistic expectations.
Yeah,
But I'm guessing that's just the first step, right?
Hmm.
Recognizing the patterns.
absolutely.
What's next?
Once you see those patterns, you can start to challenge them. You can ask yourself, is this thought really helpful right now? Is it real or is it just my emotions?
Okay, that makes sense. But sometimes, even when you're aware of those thoughts, it can still feel really hard to actually shift out of them.
It can.
Like they have a life of their own.
And that's where what he calls the mindful pause comes in. And this is so simple but so powerful.
Oh,
Just take moments throughout your day to stop. Take a breath. Hit the reset button.
love that. The mental reset button.
Exactly.
It makes me think of that saying, respond, don't react.
That's it. It's about creating that space
Yeah.
between the thing that's happening and your response.
So you're not just like knee-jerk reacting.
Exactly.
All right, so we've got the self-awareness through journaling.
Right.
We've got the mindful pauses to hit that reset button.
Yeah.
What other tools do we have here?
This one might seem really basic, but it's actually super powerful. Moawad talks about the language you use. So not just in how you talk about things, but even the words in your head.
Okay, so it's more than just the typical don't be so negative pep talk.
It is. It's deeper than that.
What are we talking about here?
It's about realizing that words have a huge impact on our thoughts and feelings.
Totally.
So instead of saying, this is a disaster,
Yeah,
maybe it's, this is a challenge, instead of, I'm terrible at this.
right.
Maybe it's, I'm still learning. It's subtle, but it can make a big difference.
So it's like reframing the situation without getting swept away by all the emotion.
Exactly.
Almost like taking back control of the narrative in your head.
That's a great way to put it. And this leads into another one of his big strategies, focusing on what you can control.
Yeah, there's a lot in life we can't control.
Oh, tons, right.
It's like a constant reminder sometimes.
But we waste so much energy stressing about those things.
Oh, yeah.
So neutral thinking helps you figure out what can you actually change.
Yeah, what are those actions you can take?
Exactly. And what do you just need to let go of?
Okay, so I'm starting to see how these all work together, each one building on the other.
Yeah.
But I'm curious, how does this whole neutral thinking thing actually work in those really high-pressure environments
Oh, yeah.
that Moawad talks about in the book?
Yeah.
You know, when the stakes are high.
Okay, so picture this. You're Russell Wilson.
Hmm.
You're the star quarterback, and you're facing a crucial fourth down.
Yeah.
The stadium is roaring. The clock is ticking down.
The pressure's on.
Talk about pressure.
Oh, yeah, that's a whole other level.
So how does neutral thinking work here? It's about training yourself to stay in the present moment.
Not letting your mind get stuck in the past or worry about the future.
Exactly. You're laser focused.
It's like blocking out all that mental noise.
It is.
And getting into that flow state where you're not overthinking, you're just
Yeah,
doing.
that's it. And that's what they worked on. And by using these neutral thinking strategies, he was able to stay calm.
Wow.
Make those clear decisions even with all that pressure.
And that translates into results, right?
Yeah.
Super Bowl ring.
Yeah.
But it sounds like this isn't just for elite athletes.
No.
Moawad talks about how these same principles can be applied in other demanding fields.
Absolutely. So whether you're leading a company or negotiating a big deal or even just dealing with something tough in your personal life,
Yeah.
neutral thinking can be a game changer.
Yeah.
It helps you stay grounded and perform at your best.
Now, life isn't always smooth sailing.
Right.
So how does this approach help you deal with setbacks and failures?
Yeah.
Because we all face those.
Yeah. And that's actually where this mindset really shines. Instead of seeing those failures as like a personal defeat,
Oh, yeah.
neutral thinking helps you see them as opportunities for growth.
So it's about asking yourself, what can I learn from this?
Yes.
What's the next step?
Yeah.
Instead of getting stuck in self-doubt.
Exactly. You detach from the emotion and you see things more objectively.
That makes a lot of sense. But I imagine it's tough to do that on your own, especially when you're in the middle of something challenging.
It can be. And that's why having a support system is so important.
Mm.
Having people around you who get it, who can offer encouragement, that can make all the difference.
So it's like having that network of people to help you stay on track with your neutral thinking practice.
It is.
Okay, so we've talked about some immediate benefits of neutral thinking,
Right.
like handling pressure, bouncing back from setbacks.
Yeah.
But what about the long game?
Yeah.
How does this mindset set you up for success over time?
Well, think about it. Every time you practice neutral thinking, you're basically training your brain to be more resilient.
You're building that growth mindset
Yeah,
where challenges become opportunities.
exactly. And that's where the idea of scaling neutral thinking comes in.
Okay.
It's about taking these core strategies and making them part of your everyday routine.
I love making things a habit. So how do we actually do that?
Yeah.
How do we make neutral thinking part of our daily lives in a way that lasts?
Well, we already talked about journaling. That's a great starting point.
Yeah.
Make it a ritual. Even just a few minutes of meditation could be so helpful.
It's like you're building that mental muscle,
Yeah.
getting stronger with each rep.
Totally. But it's a practice, right? You don't have to be perfect at it right away.
Yeah.
It's the consistent effort over time that matters.
And as you get more consistent, you start to see those ripple effects in all areas of your life.
Oh, yeah.
Your relationships, your health, your work, it all starts to shift.
It does.
So what are some of those ripple effects we might see?
Yeah. Well, let's start with relationships. Neutral thinking can help you approach disagreements with more empathy and understanding. It helps you communicate better.
So less drama.
Less drama, more harmony.
I like it. But it sounds like the benefits go beyond just how we interact with others.
Yeah, definitely. There's a huge impact on your health, too. When you manage stress better, you just feel better overall.
Oh, for sure.
Yes.
Less stress, more energy, sign me up.
Yeah.
But what about in our work lives?
Yeah.
Because let's be real, work can be a major source of stress for a lot of people.
It can be, but neutral thinking can help there, too. It helps you make better decisions, be more creative,
Yeah.
and lead with more confidence and resilience.
So it's about becoming a more effective leader.
Yes.
Not just in a job title, but in how you approach your work and your life.
That's a great way to put it. It's about reaching your full potential.
We've covered a lot of ground here, and it's clear to me that neutral thinking is way more than just a self-help buzzword.
It is.
It's a whole approach to personal growth that can make a real impact.
Yeah.
But before we wrap up this part of our deep dive,
Yeah.
what are your overall thoughts on the book? What are the key takeaways for you?
Well, what really stood out to me is that It's not just another self-help book with a bunch of fluffy platitudes.
Yeah.
Moawad gives you a practical, grounded approach to having a more balanced and fulfilling life.
Yeah. It's not about forcing yourself to be positive all the time,
Right.
which I think can backfire
Totally.
and just feel fake.
It can.
It's about building that more realistic and resilient mindset
Exactly.
that can handle whatever life throws your way.
And what I love is that it actually gives you the tools to do that.
It's not just theory.
It's a practical guide.
It's empowering.
Yeah,
You're not waiting for something to change. You're taking charge.
that's it.
Okay, so we've gone through the ins and outs of neutral thinking and how it can benefit us both in the short term and the long term.
Yeah.
But I want to leave our listener with one final thought for now before we continue in our next segment.
Okay.
If you had to pick one key takeaway from getting to neutral that really resonated with you,
Oh, that's a great question.
what would it be?
Okay, if I had to choose just one, it would be this. You always have the power to choose how you respond to any situation. It's not always easy, but by building that neutral mindset,
Yeah.
you can get the resilience and the clarity to navigate life's challenges with more grace and purpose.
That is such a powerful message.
And that's a gift worth pursuing.
So as we wrap up this first part of our deep dive into getting to neutral, I want to encourage you to really think about that. The power of choice and how you respond.
Yes.
And we'll pick back up in our next segment with even more practical tools and insights from Moawad's book.
Sounds good. So, ready to dig a little deeper into these neutral thinking tools?
I am. That idea of having more control over my reactions, especially under pressure, that's super appealing.
Yeah.
But I'm also curious how all of this connects back to the brain science stuff you were talking about earlier.
Oh, yeah, that's a great point. It's one thing to talk about these mental strategies, but when you understand how they're actually impacting your brain,
Yeah.
it makes it even more powerful.
It's like knowing how your car engine works. You can still drive without that knowledge,
Right.
but understanding the mechanics can help you troubleshoot and get better performance.
Perfect analogy. So remember we talked about the prefrontal cortex?
Yeah.
That's the part of your brain that's responsible for planning decision making.
Keeping those impulses in check.
Exactly. It's
Yeah.
like the CEO of your brain.
Right. And then we've got the amygdala, which we call the drama queen,
Right.
handling all those emotional responses.
Exactly. Now, when we're under stress, the amygdala tends to take over. It triggers that fight or flight response. But
Yeah.
neutral thinking is like training your prefrontal cortex to stay in charge.
So instead of getting hijacked by those emotional reactions,
Right.
you're basically rewiring your brain to respond differently to stress.
You are. That's exactly it.
That's so cool.
And a lot of Moawad's strategies, like those mindful pauses, are designed to strengthen that prefrontal cortex muscle.
Okay, let's talk more about those mindful pauses.
Yeah.
You mentioned Moawad suggests specific breathing techniques, like the 4-7-8 method.
Oh, yeah.
I've heard of that, but I'll be honest, I've never really tried it. Does it actually work?
It can be surprisingly effective. And remember, it's not just about calming down.
Right.
It's about interrupting that automatic stress response and giving your prefrontal cortex a chance to step in. So with the 4-7-8 method, you inhale deeply for a count of 4.
Go.
Hold your breath for a count of 7, and then exhale slowly for a count of 8.
Okay, so that's not too complicated. Do you think it really matters how you breathe? Or is it more about just taking those moments to pause and reset?
I think both are important. Intentional breathing techniques like the 4-7-8 method have been shown to have physiological effects like slowing your heart rate, calming your nervous system.
Yeah.
But even just taking a few conscious breaths can shift your mental state. The key is to make it a deliberate practice, something you do regularly throughout the day.
So it's almost like building that mental muscle memory.
It is.
The more you do it, the easier it becomes to access that neutral state, even when things are getting crazy.
Exactly. And remember, neutral thinking is not about suppressing your emotions altogether.
Right.
It's about acknowledging them,
Yeah,
but not letting them control your behavior.
right. It's about harnessing that emotional energy and using it productively.
Absolutely. Now, speaking of harnessing energy, there's another strategy that Moawad talks about that I think is so relevant to this idea of long-term success. It's about learning to focus on what you can control. And let's face it, there's a whole lot in life that we can't control.
Oh, for sure. Sometimes it feels like the only thing I can control is what I have for breakfast. But I get what you're saying. It's easy to get caught up in worrying about all the what ifs.
It is. But that's where neutral thinking comes in. It helps you differentiate between what you can influence and what you can't. It encourages you to put your energy towards taking action,
Yeah.
towards those things that you can actually impact.
Instead of getting stuck in all that worry and anxiety.
Exactly.
So it's about asking yourself, okay, what's the next step I can take? What's within my power right now?
Yes. And it's not about ignoring the things you can't control.
Right.
It's about acknowledging them, accepting them, and then consciously choosing to focus your attention on what you can do.
Yeah.
It's a subtle shift, but it can make such a huge difference in how you approach challenges and how you manage your energy.
I could already see how powerful that could be,
It is.
especially when it comes to feeling less overwhelmed and more in control.
It really is a game changer.
Okay, so we've talked about some pretty powerful strategies so far, but I'm really curious about how this all plays out in real life. I know Moawad worked with Russell Wilson to implement these strategies,
Right.
but I'd love to hear some more concrete examples.
Of course.
Mhm.
So Moawad talks about how he used these principles with the entire Seattle Seahawks team.
Oh, wow.
And he really emphasizes how important it is for everyone, from the coaches to the players, to be on the same page about neutral thinking. They even incorporated specific cues and reminders into their training and their game day rituals.
Wow, so it's like building a whole culture of neutral thinking.
Exactly.
Right.
And he uses examples from the business world too, like Jeff Bezos, the founder of Amazon.
Okay.
He's known for his data-driven decision-making approach.
Right.
And Moawad points out that this really aligns with neutral thinking.
It's about taking the emotion out of it.
It is. It's about focusing on the facts.
Okay, so it's not about ignoring your gut feelings entirely.
Right.
It's about balancing them with a more objective perspective. Exactly. And remember, one of the key tenets of neutral thinking is to focus on the present moment.
Yeah.
That's crucial in business, where it's so easy to get caught up in past successes or anxieties about the future.
Right. It's about staying grounded in the here and now, making the best decision you can with the information you have in this moment.
Yes.
I can see how that would be a huge advantage in a fast-paced environment like the tech world.
Absolutely. And it's not just about making decisions. It's also about navigating those inevitable setbacks that every business faces.
Because let's be real, no matter how well you plan, things don't always go according to plan.
Never.
So how does neutral thinking help you deal with those curveballs?
That's where that resilience building aspect really comes into play. Remember, it's about seeing those setbacks not as personal defeats,
Yeah.
but as opportunities for growth and learning.
So instead of getting bogged down in self-blame or negativity,
Right.
you're asking, okay, what did this experience teach me? How can I adjust my approach? What's the next step?
Exactly. Neutral thinking helps you to detach from that emotional sting of failure
And see the situation more clearly.
more objectively. Yeah, it's almost like taking a step back.
Becoming an observer
Yeah.
of your own experience.
You got it.
Which can give you a whole new perspective.
Absolutely.
This is all starting to click for me now. But I'm wondering, how do you actually make this a sustainable practice?
That's where we get into the idea of scaling neutral thinking.
Okay, let's talk about that in our next segment.
Sounds good.
I'm eager to learn how to make this more than just a temporary mindset, but a way of life. Okay, so we've explored some really powerful concepts around neutral thinking so far, and I'm ready to dive into this idea of scaling it that you mentioned. It sounds like that's where the real transformation happens, turning these strategies into something you can actually sustain.
Yeah, you got it. Scaling neutral thinking is about weaving these principles into your life so they become more than just, isolated techniques. They become like a way of being.
So we're talking about building those mental habits. So neutral thinking becomes almost like second nature.
Exactly. Think of it like learning an instrument or training for a marathon. At first, it takes a lot of effort and focus.
Yeah.
But over time, with consistent practice, those movements, those responses, they become more fluid, more automatic.
That's a great analogy. I can see how that applies here.
Mm.
But where do we even begin? What are some practical ways to start scaling neutral thinking?
One of the most powerful ways is through something we've already talked about. Journaling Moawad is a big believer in making this a regular practice, a daily ritual, if you will. It's about creating that space for self-reflection, to notice those thought patterns and intentionally shift them.
It's almost like having a conversation with yourself on paper.
Yeah.
You can step back, observe your thoughts and feelings, and start to challenge those negative or, overly optimistic narratives that might be holding you back.
Exactly. And you might be surprised by the insights that come up when you start paying attention to that inner dialogue. It's like shining a light on those subconscious beliefs and patterns that are driving your behavior.
Okay, so journaling is key.
Uh,
What else? I'm guessing Those mindful pauses we discussed play a role here too.
Absolutely. The great thing about mindful pauses is that they can fit into any schedule.
Yeah.
Whether you're stuck in traffic, waiting in line, or just feeling overwhelmed, taking a few conscious breaths can instantly change how you feel.
It's like having that reset button in your fingertips anytime you need it.
That's it.
And I love that it's such a simple practice. You don't need any special equipment or a ton of time.
Nope. It's all about accessibility and consistency. And remember those breathing techniques we talked about, like the 4-7-8 method, can be really powerful for calming the nervous system and giving your prefrontal cortex a chance to take over again.
And I know you're also a big advocate for mindfulness practices.
Oh, yeah?
How do those fit into this idea of scaling neutral thinking?
Mindfulness practices like meditation are like training wheels for your mind.
Okay.
They help you build that ability to just observe your thoughts and feelings without judgment,
Yeah.
which is so important for a neutral mindset. Even a few minutes of meditation each day can make a big difference.
Okay, so we've got journaling, mindful pauses, meditation. It sounds like having a toolkit of practices you can use throughout the day is key.
I like that. A
Yeah.
toolkit. Yeah, and as you use these practices more consistently, you'll start to notice that neutral thinking starts to show up in other areas of your life. It's like a ripple effect.
So it's not just about handling stressful situations, it's about how you approach relationships, your work, your whole outlook on life. It starts to change everything.
That's right. For example, in relationships, neutral thinking can help you to be a better listener, a more empathetic communicator.
Yeah.
You're able to detach from your own emotional reactions and see things from the other person's point of view.
That's huge. So much conflict comes from those misunderstandings and knee-jerk reactions. If you can find that neutral space, I can only imagine how much that could transform how you interact with people.
It can. And in the workplace, neutral thinking can help you to be a more effective leader. You can make decisions based on logic and data, not fear or ego.
That makes me think of the example you shared about Jeff Bezos and his data-driven approach. It's about removing those emotions from the equation and really looking at the facts,
Exactly.
which can lead to better decisions and ultimately better outcomes.
Absolutely. And remember, neutral thinking isn't about becoming some kind of robot.
Right.
It's about recognizing your emotions but not letting them control you.
It's about finding that balance, that sweet spot between logic and emotion.
And as you continue to scale your neutral thinking practice, you'll start to see that balance in other areas of your life. You'll be more resilient when things get tough, more adaptable to change, and more capable of reaching your goals.
Now, as we wrap up this deep dive into getting to neutral, I want to leave our listeners with a final thought, something they can take away with them. What's the most important message you think Moawad gets across in this book?
You know, for me, it all comes down to this. You are not your thoughts. You have the power to choose which thoughts you focus on, which ones you let shape your reality. And by practicing neutral thinking, you can break free from those limiting beliefs and negative stories that might be holding you back from living a truly fulfilling and meaningful life.
That's a great way to put it. So to our listeners, I encourage you to really explore this idea of neutral thinking. Check out Moawad's book, play around with the strategies we've talked about, and see what happens for you. Because as we've learned in this deep dive, when you shift your mindset, you can truly shift your entire reality.